Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska, where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Hey, thanks, everybody. It's Suzanne Downing here with Must Read Alaska, and welcome aboard the Must Read Alaska show, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. It's happy hour. It's Monday. It is the middle of February. It's, it's getting lighter outside. And last night I was driving back from the truckers rally up in Eagle River, and it was like 5:30 and it was still light outside. You didn't have to have your headlights on even. It was great. Hey, it's great to have you on our show, with us on our show today. And I want to welcome John Quick, our co-host. John, are you on the other line there in Nikiski? Can you hear me?
I'm here, living the dream.
Yeah, we're kind of talking through the paper cup and the string method. You're out there in the wilderness, I know. How's it going?
Going good. I'm climbed a tree and I've pointed my cell phone to the nearest cell phone tower. So hopefully it'll have good signal the whole time.
Yeah, we can hear you. Even though your teeth are starting to chatter a little bit. So what's going on in politics over there on the Kenai Peninsula this week?
Well, we are still living the freedom over here on the Kenai Peninsula Borough. One of the big things that happened this last weekend was the great Mayor Charlie Pierce had his governor kickoff event this weekend at his house. And the infamous Vonnie Pierce hosted it. When she makes dinner, she doesn't mess around. It's like
she doesn't mess around. That woman, she knows how to cook.
She can cook the biggest, best spread that you've ever seen on the peninsula. And I wasn't there. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but I've heard nothing but awesome things about it.
There were a lot of people there.
Lots of people came out, even folks that were Dunleavy supporters that wanted to see what Charlie was all about. If you look on Charlie's Facebook page, there's a picture of Tuckerman was even there at the event. And the thing that I think that people resonate with Charlie is that he is a guy that says what people are thinking, and he's not afraid to say it. And so we've seen here on the peninsula, our district has endorsed him. A Republicans Women's Club here on the peninsula has also endorsed him. And we'll probably see some other folks endorse him here down the road. But I think, you can't go wrong with a campaign kickoff event at your house with a bunch of people that are, gung-ho for your campaign. And it sounded like there was a lot of energy in the room and that it was a successful event.
Yeah. And, Charlie is a really kind of a great leader. He says what's on his mind. He speaks plainly. He doesn't mess around. You kind of always know where you stand with him. You may disagree with him, but he's a really good guy. And so it's, remember, everybody, with this ranked choice voting, we do probably have to have another Republican on the ballot that is a viable Republican. And we're going to go into August with probably 10 to 15 people on the ballot for governor. Only 4 will emerge, and they'll go to the November ballot. And at that point, we're going to have to rank them in the order that we prefer. Now, some of us will stop at 1. Some of us will stop at 2. There is no way in heck you can ever get me to even put Bill Walker as a 3rd choice, because I think he was the worst governor Alaska's ever had. And I would never vote for Les Guerra either for governor. Why would I do that? Why would I even put him as number 4? I'm just not into it. But I might vote number 1 and number 2. And so some people might vote Charlie Pierce number 1. Some people might vote for Mike Dunleavy's number 1. And they may share a lot of votes back and forth. But we are going to have to be in a ranked choice environment. So I guess we have to kind of get used to that. And it's probably be best if these guys didn't beat up each other too much. Now, I know that Chris Kirka is also running for governor. He's from the Valley. He's from sort of Dunleavy, heart of Dunleavy country. And he's beating up Dunleavy as hard as he can. So he's trying to hand this election to Bill Walker because that's his approach.
Yeah, but I don't know if I don't agree, with that. I'm with you on that, Suzanne. I think, save that stuff for the general. I don't think it's a great time to be putting, if your main message is negative, I don't think people resonate with that. Well, if your main message is this person needs to be fired, this person needs to be fired, or this person's done 1,000 things wrong. I think now's the time to talk to folks about what you stand for and what you think you can accomplish. And so I think I think we'll see that with Dunleavy and Pierce. Is that's probably what they'll focus on. And with ranked choice, with ranked choice voting, it's going to be nuts because folks can, if you're listening to this podcast, you can Google Maine 2019 elections, and the first thing that will pop up in the Google images is a picture of the 2019 race in Maine. I believe it was one of their first statewide races with ranked choice voting. And the guy that got the most amount of votes ended up losing because of the ranked choice voting algorithm. And it's plain as day right there. New York Times, the guy with the most amount of votes lost to a Democrat because the Democrat figured out a way to get more second, third, and fourth place votes. So there's going to be a strategy here for folks. If you're running, there's a strategy behind how do I get second place votes? How do I get third place votes? How do I get fourth place votes? And I don't know if anybody's really thought through how to best do that correctly.
I don't think they're thinking it through. All these guys who are running are thinking old school. They're all thinking it's binary. Vote for me or vote for the other guy. That's not how it's going to be. And you've got to work your entire strategy differently. In other words, you want those third place votes. Of course you do. And you want those second place votes. And so you're going to have to talk to some of your different constituencies in different ways. You're going to have to really segment people, understand your data and who you're talking to, and approach them in different ways. I mean, you don't approach doctors on the hillside in Anchorage the same way you approach a long haul truck driver going up to to Prudhoe Bay. You have to kind of approach them differently. The message may not be different. It may be still economic freedom and lower regulation, but you don't use the same language. You don't use the same imagery to connect with them. You just don't. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Anything else going on with the Kenai?
Not much, but I have a question in my mind that's been burning in all of the folks and the hearts and the minds of all of Anchorage. And that is Suzanne.
What?
Who is Tom Sconce?
Oh, no. I can't believe you went there. All right. I don't know. The answer is, it's like nobody knows. I mean, Chris Constant knows. I mean, Chris Constant, Tom Sconce, a little bit of a sort of a play on words there, I think. So there's a big scandal brewing down there in the assembly, and it is involving a couple of people, probably Chris Constant and Felix Rivera most of all, maybe a little sprinkle of Forrest Dunbar in there. What they've got going on is they are protecting documents, 591 pages of documents requested by a member of the public under a public records request. And if we've heard a lot from this assembly about having transparent government, and transparent government means you release those documents. And so unless they're deliberative or they impact a pending contract, like if you're going to buy a hotel or property, you might not be able to see something that's in the process, but afterwards we get to see that. So Russell Biggs has asked for all kinds of communications between the assembly members and various people, including, I don't know how he got this name, Tom Sconce at tcs907@gmail.com. And turns out this Tom Sconce is just a fictitious person. He doesn't exist, but they've been writing to him. They've got some communications with him, and they've got stuff they're saying to him that they don't want us to know about. Probably because that person is related to either the Blue Alaskan, which is a leftist blog run by some sort of City Hall insiders, or maybe the Anchorage Press. We're not really sure which one it belongs to because those two work so closely together. The Anchorage Press and the Blue Alaska kind of meld as one in many instances. So we're not sure who Tom Sconce is, but we sure do know that the assembly does not want those documents out. And John, they redacted 591 pages in this public records request, basically more than a ream of paper that they're giving back to Russell Biggs that are just blank. And by blank, I mean many of these pages don't have a to or a from on them. They don't have a date. They don't have a subject matter, and they don't have a page number. They're just like a virgin piece of paper that you could run through a copier. And what's really interesting, John, is that they didn't even give a log to Russell Biggs saying, here's why we redacted it, and we're using this particular privilege for redacting it. They just gave him his paper back.
They're using the, oh crap, we are super scared privilege, and we don't think this is going to be emotionally stable for us to keep these emails in here, so we're going to redact them.
That's exactly right. Now, a lot of the emails weren't to Tom Sconce, and we don't know how many are to Tom Sconce. We know some of them probably are. And Tom Sconce, we believe, is probably, like I said, it's a member of the media that's super friendly to them. And it's probably a City Hall insider or former City Hall insider, like former city manager Bill Falsey and his wife, or maybe a sort of an Ethan Berkowitz type person. And but there were also emails to another person named Casey Pick. And Casey Pick works for the Trevor Project in Washington, D.C. It's an advocacy group that does advocacy for people in government, especially gay, lesbian members of government who are trying to change laws for transgenders, like they did here. They did the bathroom law here, where boys can use girls' bathrooms if they want to. If all they have to do is put on a dress and they can go on in the girls' bathroom, and also for other things in terms of gay and lesbian issues, such as the conversion therapy ban that they passed in 2021. It was pretty controversial because what it does is basically tells therapists that if a kid comes in and they've got a little bit of confusion about their identity, like, I'm not sure, maybe I like boys, maybe I like girls, that therapist has to presume that they are gay or lesbian or whatever, and they cannot work with them at all to say, well, maybe you're not, maybe you're just experimenting. They can't do that. They can't turn them in any way. They have to completely accept whatever sexual identity they feel like, I'm attracted to my stuffed animal, whatever it is. You can't work with that because that's that child's sexual identity. And you can't use any kind of conversion therapy techniques or talk them through it in any way. So there's a ban on that conversion therapy now. And they use the Trevor Project. They use the attorney named Casey Pick, apparently to have their communication with to craft their law that bans conversion therapy. Now, Casey Pick is not a lawyer who's licensed to practice in the state of Alaska. And Casey Pick is not even on contract with the Assembly. And yet they are using attorney-client privilege to protect all of their communications with Casey Pick. And that is not going to fly.
No,
John, that's not going to work.
This is if there's a miracle happening and you happen to be an Assembly member who's listening to this, Anchorage Assembly member, people will get to the bottom of this. We will find out who Tom Sconce is. We will find out what was in those redacted emails, because they're most likely not executive privilege or attorney-client privilege. And if you are emailing back and forth with somebody of the media, great. I don't really care. It doesn't bother me. But when somebody asks for that information, that needs to be public information. And if Assembly members had access to Tom Sconce's email, that's not going to be great. If 2 or 3 of those folks were in there having access to that email, which was a Gmail, which was not on city property, and they were trying to do business from that email, this is all going to be very, very bad for folks that were involved in this. And the easiest way, if there's nothing, frivolous that's going on, is just to release all that information. That's the easiest way to get rid of this. If you really think that there's nothing behind this, Constance, Dunbar, or whoever that's involved in this, just release it. Release the information. Do the things that you always talk about of being transparent and truthful and all that. You talk about all that kind of stuff all the time. You sit there and you get on your 17 podiums and speak to folks like they're a bunch of idiots, and you tell them, be truthful, be transparent, and all this kind of stuff. And then when it's your time to do it, you sit back and you put your tail between your legs and you play the victim, and you're not truthful and you're not transparent. So now's the time to put the money where your mouth is and be transparent for once in your life on the assembly chamber floor.
Well, exactly right. And you recall during one of the recent elections, I think Chris Costin paid for a cartoonist to put out a cartoon, and I use it occasionally because it's just hilarious, and how they're a transparent government, and they've got all the Marxist 9 on there, and they aren't transparent one little bit. So the search terms were Tom Sconce. The email address was tcs907@gmail.com. The search terms were the Blue Alaskan or the Anchorage Press. They included Casey Pick as a search term, and all of that has been kept secret. Well, let me tell you, they can either do this the easy way or they can do it the hard way. The hard way is going to go through Superior Court and then the Alaska Supreme Court, because this is definitely a public records kind of, just access to, it's a violation of the Public Records Act. And so they can either do it easy or hard. And what do they want to do? But we're going to get access to it. And John, Must Read Alaska is going to set up a legal fund, and probably will do this on Tuesday, set up a legal fund to pay for the legal cost of getting this to court, because this is ridiculous. These people are now acting in kind of just I want to say, they're acting real gangsta is how they're acting. But the way that they have treated this is kind of interesting, because they not only have locked down these documents, but they have now decided that their 2-hour executive session, that is also privileged forever, that their discussion, even 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, can never be known by the public. Let me tell you, last week when they got in front of the public after their executive session, they came out, gavelled back in, and Chris Constant could not move fast enough to call for the question. I mean, anytime that somebody said anything, he said, call a question. And so that he wanted to vote on it without discussion. And so they called for the question because the majority has, they've got the right to do that. They knew what they were doing, and they had arrangements in advance. You could see Chris Constant sort of looking down at his phone. You could see Felix Rivera typing to him. And all of a sudden, Chris Constant would call the question. These guys are in trouble. I'm telling you, they are acting in pretty big illegal fashion.
Yeah, when this stuff must be getting underneath their skin a little bit, because you just posted a story about how LaFrance allegedly went up to the mayor's office and for an issue and cussed out the new chief of staff for the mayor. And that is something that is just not good behavior to have. And even if there's stuff like this, like Tom Sconce and records requests and things aren't going your way, and the public doesn't see that the assembly is doing their job, and you're frustrated as an assembly person, the last thing you need to do is to go cuss out municipal employees that are just trying to do their jobs. Let's tell
our listeners kind of what we're talking about. So last week at the assembly meeting, they confirmed the new police chief, Michael Curl, and he is the new police chief after the last one, Ken McCoy, resigned after less than a year. So Ken McCoy, when he was made police chief, they brought him and his family up and they congratulated him, and he got to say a few nice words, and they took a picture and all that. And then they had a party, and they had another ceremonial swearing in, and they had a lot of sort of festivities all the way from April when he was first sworn in, all the way into August. They were still having ceremonial swearing in ceremonies for Ken McCoy. So Chief Curl, they put him on the consent agenda. They approve it. And the consent agenda is where you put all the junk, where it's just nothing important on the consent agenda. So it's just you approve it in bulk. They approve him, and then they move on. He's sitting there. He actually rises thinking, oh, maybe they're going to ask me to come talk. And she just says, thank you, Chief. Thanks for being our chief. And then he's sitting there with his wife, and she'd been out of state, and she flew in because of this being confirmed as a big deal. And what an insult. They just leave them sitting there in the assembly, and they don't bring them up to congratulate them or anything. So then the mayor, Mayor Bronson, who, just says what's on his mind. So the next day he's swearing him in. They're swearing in the new police chief, curl. And during his remarks, the mayor says, I'm really sorry that the assembly treated you so poorly and didn't even give you a chance to speak yesterday because, this is obviously the capstone of your career. It's 27 years in the force, and now you're the police chief. It's a big deal. And well, word got back to Suzanne LaFrance that the mayor had called her out on the insult that she had made during that meeting. And she stormed into the mayor's office, went into the chief of staff's office, reamed the chief of staff up one side down the other, dropped the F-bomb, and then stormed out. And the new chief of staff had only been on the job for like a week. And she's just like treating her very politely because she is the chair of the assembly. But it is inappropriate, I think, for somebody who is elected as a legislative body to go into the executive branch and to drop F-bombs on the employees of the municipality. It's not appropriate.
Yeah, they need to grow up a little bit and do business in a way that they would like business done towards them. And it's a new low for them, which we're seeing new lows seems like every week.
Yeah.
And one thing I can tell you just from experience, when I was on chief of staff for the borough, we had an assembly member who was the chair, Kelly Cooper, and her and I would disagree on a paint color of what's on the wall. I would think it's white and she would say it's pink. And we pretty much didn't agree on anything. But one thing I could tell you is for all of our disagreements and pretty much every policy that she put forward, I didn't agree with. Whenever she would call the office or stop into the office, she was always respectful. She drew the line in the sand of that. And I think it's possible to do that. You can adamantly disagree with somebody until the wheels come off, but still show some respect when you have to interact with them. So LaFrance, I would encourage you and I would charge you to think through what the position that you're in, and people are watching, and it's disrespectful and disgusting when behavior like that happens. You're a public servant. You're not a god. So
yeah, and I don't know, just going in and abusing employees. That if you have a problem with the mayor, go talk to the mayor, send him a note, whatever. But don't go in and abuse employees. That's just not right. Yeah, it was not her finest moment. I will say that. Speaking of which, finest moment happened on Sunday with the truckers convoy. And I know you guys had some truckers convoy action down there on the Kenai, but the big action was here in South Central. We had a whole bunch of trucks coming down from the Matsu, and they left at 11:30 on Sunday, and they came down here and they joined up with trucks at Cabela's. And there were probably well over 100 trucks. And then there were smaller trucks as well. And also some SUVs that were painted up with signs saying no mandates and things like that. Lots of flags, lots of Canadian flags. I didn't know we had so many Canadian flags in Alaska, but there were plenty of those. Alaska flags, American flags. And they all got in a convoy. We all got in a convoy and rode up to the Lions Club in Eagle River. It was a really nice day for a drive. I mean, the conditions on the road were nice. They weren't too slick. The convoy was respectful. It stayed to the right side of the road on the Seward Highway and out on the Glen Highway. We didn't run into any protesters or anything. I felt really lucky, John, because I got a chance to ride with Jimmy Johnson Enterprises in one of those rigs.
Nice.
And with Jimmy Johnson himself, who's a longtime haul road driver, and he's now mainly hauling heavy equipment now, but listen to stories, listen to country music, do some live streaming on Facebook. We had a great drone operator. And oh, by the way, it's something I didn't tell you, John, but I got a call from ABC News, and they're going to use our drone footage on their coverage tonight.
Nice, that's exciting.
Yeah, pretty fun. I told him, as long as you give us credit, use whatever you want. And then get up to Eagle River, and it was really great to see Dan Sullivan there. And of course, this whole thing was basically organized by Jamie Allard. And I think she's an assemblywoman here in Anchorage. I think she might have been a little nervous because the response was so much bigger than anybody ever thought. I mean, people said they thought there were 400 people involved, but if there were like 100 vehicles and there were more than 2 people per vehicle, I know that. So hundreds,
probably
of
close to
people
1,000 people.
It feels like it was more than like 1,000 people. There were people on the overpasses waving, and it was a good time. People had a really good time, and they were just making a point that the Canadian truckers are right to demand respect, and that they shouldn't have to be forced to have a government injection to keep a job. And that was really is the basis of their complaint. Government injections to keep jobs are probably not where we want to go in a free society, right?
Amen to
So,
that.
so we had a great day. For me, getting to drive in a truck is a big fun thing. It's like going to Disneyland. So, especially if I don't have to take responsibility for the steering wheel. We had a good time, and it was really good to see Dan Sullivan there connecting with people. He spoke to the people. Jamie Allard spoke. He did a great job explaining that the government mandates for these shots to keep a job are not right, and that the Biden administration is on the wrong track. And of course, the Canadian truckers are on the right track. And he explained. He said, I've had the vaccine myself, but here's the deal. I did it by choice. I did it by choice, and it ought to be by choice. And that's what I've always said. I've also had the vaccines because of my age and my health profile. I talked to a couple of my doctor friends who are real libertarian minded, and they said, considering your age and considering your health profile, I think I'd probably go ahead and do it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. But it was by choice, and that was the thing. And so he was great because he was talking to the truckers, with the truckers, and he was connecting with them, hundreds of them. And they really appreciated him. Meanwhile, back in Washington, D.C., the two who are running for office, Don Young and Lisa Murkowski, were dumping on Alaskans and others who had gone to Washington, D.C. on the 6th of January last year, because they were saying they were all involved in criminal activity, and they were separating themselves from the RNC, the Republican National Committee, which had voted in Salt Lake City on Friday to condemn any action against lawful protest in the nation's capital. And remember, John, there were probably 100 or 200 people who acted unlawfully, maybe a few more, we don't know. But most of the people who went to Washington, D.C. acted lawfully on January 6, 2021. They were just there to hear the president speak, and they were there to protest the Electoral College results, which they thought were flawed. But they did not break into the Capitol. Some of them walked in, ushered in by Capitol Police. They didn't even know that there was a problem going in because the police were standing there saying, come on in. But for our own delegation to dump on people like that and to throw everybody in the same category was a little bit weird, I thought. Like, what can you not just separate out the people who are lawful with the people who are unlawful? Because there weren't any Alaskans who, well, I think there was maybe one Alaskan who did something unlawful, but it's just a very small fraction of the thousands of people who are in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it was
So-
it's a very clear picture of the drastic contrast of Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan. You have Senator Sullivan literally at the trucker rally in Anchorage saying no vaccine mandates. He supports truckers. He supports the ability to assemble and protest. And Lisa Murkowski's big thing was to release a bunch of promotional videos of her being endorsed by her Democratic senator.
Yeah,
and
Joe Manchin. Yeah,
that is the contrast. People, you have a Dan Sullivan who's literally in the trenches of the protests with the truckers, elbow to elbow, high-fiving people, congratulating people, thanking them for being there, and makes time for the folks that took time out of their day to do a protest for freedom. And Lisa Murkowski spent her time making videos with Democratic senators talking about how awesome she is.
Yeah, not cool, not really cool. Well, gosh, I can't believe that our half hour is up, John. This is just, I'm sorry, and I probably kind of hog the mic here today, but I really appreciate you and your perspective on this. And we're going to write some stories about this. You'll see a story on Must Read Alaska later today about this contrast between the two. Senator Sullivan in the trenches with the people and supporting their right to protest, where you have obviously Lisa Murkowski's probably done some polling. She probably knows where she needs to be, but she's got Joe Manchin's support, and that's a fascinating. She's starting to separate herself from the Republican Party, which is probably appropriate since they've asked her to leave and they've asked her to not run as a Republican. And maybe this is her first steps toward that. Who knows? She doesn't have to file in officially until June 1. So maybe she's starting to break away from the Republican Party. That's what we're seeing today. So everybody, if you're a supporter of Must Read Alaska, really appreciate it. It's the end of our show today, but if you go to the website, we've remodeled it. We're in the middle of sort of just finessing a few things on there, but it's looking pretty good. We're happy with the way it looks, and I think you will be too. So go to mustreadalaska.com. On the right-hand side, you kind of search around, you're still going to find that donate button, and we really, really appreciate your support. It allows us to pay for all the services that are required to keep the website up, the podcast up, our Facebook page, and all these back-end services that we have to pay for. So thanks a lot for helping keep the lights on here at Must Read Alaska. Until next week, we're signing off somewhere in Alaska.